Hello and welcome back to Cape Corner, where we explore the history, story, and cultural impact of a different character or group every episode. I'm Blue, and I'm once again joined by Scotty.
What's up, Blue? And hello, listeners. Jordan, if you're listening.
Right. Uh, yeah, how you been lately, man?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back on.
Yeah, I'm ready to learn a lot more about G.I. Joe. The last episode
Yes,
we did together was extremely informational. I felt like I learned a whole lot.
yes.
Um,
And the
and
big reason we're
and
doing
we're
this
we're
one
doing
is because we didn't get really much of a chance to talk about Snake Eyes, the most
yeah, I was
popular
gonna say we're
character.
doing the ninja today, which is very cool. You know, I'm a
Yes.
big fan of ninjas, so
Well, yeah.
um,
And in the 90s, G.I. Joe, the reason I insisted on calling it Snake Eyes and the Ninja Force is because G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, was totally rebranded to Snake Eyes and the Ninja Force.
that's wild.
largely to largely to compete with another ninja-based toy, comic, and cartoon that had a live-action movie by this point. Can you guess what that is?
In the 90s,
Yeah,
uh, ninjas. I don't know. What is it?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, duh. Oh, fuck.
Yes, the 90s was a Ninja Crave era because that's also when Valiant had launched, and one of their big titles was Ninja, which I have a few of. Because I think I'd also floated like Valiant stuff as like topics for the show.
I feel like such a sham of a TMNT fan that I didn't pick up on that. Like, of course it was them. They're the whole reason why parents started banning nunchucks from their homes.
Yeah, yes. And are you familiar with Michelle Ivy?
No, who's
You
that?
might have, she's the, I don't know if you've ever seen this like clip of going around of like it was a program that like went on like unhealthy obsessions. And there was a segment on her where she basically based her entire lifestyle around the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and threw like so much money away on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles memorabilia. Like she has all the
I personally don't think it's throwing money away if you're surrounding yourself with the things you love, but you know, I
Mhm.
understand like people get wary of addiction and whatnot, so I
Yeah,
can understand it.
like a hobby is good unless you're putting yourself in debt over it.
Yeah, okay. That to be clear, when I say it's okay to spend money on what you love, I
Mhm.
don't mean until you have no money left.
Yeah, like I try to like keep my hobbies at a reasonable spending.
Yeah, the
Like
way
I
my
just bought.
mom taught me to do it was you first spend your money on your necessities, you get your rent
Mhm.
paid, you get food on
Mhm.
the table, you know, you pay for any stuff that you need, and then whatever you have left over, then you can spend that on what you want. So that's like
Yeah,
the order of operations people I should do.
yes, and that's one of the things why I love like shopping at vintage stocks is I'll find like I just found Wildcats the compendium for $5, and
Mm,
it's like this is just a trade, but you're calling it a compendium for like the obsessive readers. Like a compendium, like I've shown you the Transformers and GI Joe compendiums. Those are
right.
massive. This
Yeah,
Wildcats thing, it's just a standard trade paperback
man.
masquerading as a compendium.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
It's
Uh,
not much of a bummer because it's like, oh, I get like a 90s back when Wildstorm was part of Image. So I get the original like Image trade format. And so it's like, and maybe it may call itself a compendium, it, despite being a trade, but it's like, I'll take it for this, the $5.
true. All right.
But
So you
yeah,
said before we started, you said you wanted to address a couple of news items before we really
yeah.
get rolling.
So this past month, we lost a legend in the comic book world, Peter David, who, for those of you who want to know, if you've seen anything with the Hulk or read any more recent Hulk comics, you can thank Peter David for his characterization in either the 90s Hulk cartoon, all the films, the MCU, or that 2003 Hulk film, or Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Basically, anything Hulk related was heavily influenced by Peter David's era on the Hulk. And the whole Professor Hulk, that was all Peter David's idea.
So there's a lot of the more psychological aspects of the Hulk, based on his work.
Yes, yes, yes. So basically, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they came up with like basically laid the foundations, and Peter David built an entire casino or motel out of that.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if you ever heard my old Hulk episode, but I impressed on oh shit, I'm blanking on his name, but my guest for that episode, I was telling him that like a lot of people see Hulk as just big angry smashy man, and that's
Yes,
kind of
we
what he
can thank
started
Stan
out
Lee and
as.
Jack
But there's
Kirby
like
for that.
what's that?
We can say thank Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for that.
Yeah, yeah. But like I said, all the coolest aspects of the Hulk are ones that they never really do in the movies.
Mhm.
Is that he's got a deep psychological story going on. So like that's always been my favorite, seeing the different interpretations of the Hulk being different, disparate
Mhm.
aspects of Bruce Banner's personality and whatnot. So
Like I think the Incredible Hulk film did actually a really good job with that. The whole I don't want to control it, I want to get rid of it.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah. Well, it's a shame that we lost the guy that
yeah. He also
is the
defined
reason for that.
Aquaman too. Like Aquaman's characterization since Peter David touched him has been influenced by how Peter David wrote Aquaman. So
So is he the one that transitioned Aquaman from the orange spangly little lad into like hook hand mullet, like
yes, yes,
badass?
that was.
Okay.
Yeah. And he even, I think he even also did like the Water Hand era Aquaman, and then
Hmm.
Jeff Johns did the New 52 Aquaman, which Aquaman's characterization in that is still heavily influenced by Peter David. So,
Yeah, that's probably the
so
reason why we would have a Jason Momoa Aquaman at
oh,
some point.
most
So
certainly. And even
yeah.
those films, plot-wise, borrow a lot from Peter David's run on Aquaman.
Okay.
And then on a lighter subject, Larry Hama, which is more relevant, just celebrated his 76th birthday. And as I mentioned last time, he's been writing G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, since 1982. And to this day, he's still writing it. And I actually met Paul Pelletier at a Comic Con who's doing the art on the current iteration of Hama's run.
That's cool.
And
I don't.
then, yeah,
I was just gonna say I don't know if I ever actually mentioned it on one of these episodes. I can't remember, but I recently got to meet a comic writer myself.
mm,
So I work at a movie theater, and uh there was an old couple that came in one day when we were kind of dead in the movie theater at the time, and we had just put out all the Thunderbolts posters, and
yeah,
this guy and his wife were taking pictures of the posters and whatnot. And I'm like, it's a little weird, but it's whatever. And then they
hmm
came in and asked if they could take a picture next to the poster I was standing next to, and I was like, sure. And the wife's like, thank you so much. We're doing this because my husband made Red Guardian. And I'm like, wait, what? And she's like, do
Oh,
you want a
wow.
picture with him? And I was like, sure. And so I have a picture of me and him next to the Thunderbolts poster.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah. They just happened to come in. They were like, "We're not staying long. We're here to meet friends for dinner." I was like, "Okay, well, have a good day. Thank you for coming."
Well, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so the last few things I wanted to address. Last time we talked, the G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero hardcover compendium Kickstarter was the most successful comics related Kickstarter. It has now been dethroned by Transformers. But it's
Uh,
like a hard, what I've sent you pictures of were like the soft covers, which those were going to be put out by Image regardless. But the hard covers collect, for Transformers, it collects all of the Marvel UK and Marvel US run. The G.I. Joe Transformers crossover Marvel did. And then I think issues 139 through 144 of G.I. Joe, which was during the Snake Eyes and the Ninja Force era, because that was the prelude to Transformers Generation 2, was in G.I. Joe during the Snake Eyes and the Ninja Force branding era.
okay.
And the G.I. Joe Kickstarter Compendium hardcover set collects all of the Marvel Arena American Hero, also the Transformers G.I. Joe crossover, and all of Special Missions. And I want to say European missions, which were reprints of the Marvel UK Action Force line. They, for whatever reason, they can't. No one can touch anything titled Action Force because Hasbro let the Action Force trademark lapse, and now the Action Force trademark is owned by Balaverse, which is basically doing Call of Duty the toy line in hopes of dethroning the GI Joe classified
Mm, gotcha.
line.
Man, I
And
freaking Call of Duty.
yeah, and last couple things, Mask is now part of the Energon universe, which is, for those of you who don't know, Mask is like was Kenner's basically way of doing GI Joe and Transformers as one toy line, which was it was a counterterrorism group that piloted vehicles that would transform into other vehicles. So Matt Tracker, who's now appeared in the GI Joe run in the Energon universe, he's the leader of the Mask team, and his vehicle is a car that transforms into a jet. And so Hasbro bought Kenner in the late 90s, which is why we got the Extreme Justice villain, because in the 80s, Kenner did Marvel and DC toys. And then Toy Biz came along, took over the Marvel toy business because that was actually a part of Marvel. And so it was just DC. Hasbro buys Kenner, and now Mask is part of Hasbro's
That's
what do I
cool.
want to say, catalog. Because DC actually did the 80s Mask line, so it was not part of, there were no Mask G.I. Joe Transformers crossovers until IDW did their Hasbro universe. So this will be the second time Mask has shared a universe with Transformers and G.I. Joe. Because in the 80s, I think it was just part of the DC universe, much like how Transformers, G.I. Joe, and ROM were just part of the Marvel universe. Because when I showed you the compendium, there is the issue with Spider-Man in the Transformers compendium. And J. Jonah Jameson does appear in G.I. Joe.
As I just had I just had the mental image actually when you just said that of J. Jonah Jameson being like, as if we don't have enough to worry about. Now there's giant robots, and they could be any random truck you see on the street. I tell you, this is Spider-Man's fault.
Well, actually, he kind of did that in Transformers
Really,
Into Danger.
really?
Kind of. So he and Peter Parker are in Florida, I want to say, where like the Transformers, and he's just going on a rant, and Spider-Man hides off into a corner to change into the black suit to figure out what's going on. And so that, but in G.I. Joe, he goes up to a newsstand, and Storm Shadow, Stalker, and Snake Eyes are like hiding behind like the news office, the person running the stand. And he's like, "Do you have any copies of the Bugle?" It's like, "We don't carry that trash rag around here." And J. Jonah Jameson gets all upset. "How dare you insult my paper?" And then something blows up behind him, and Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, and Stalker pop out to stop whatever progress gets in.
Wow.
And last news item, Robert Kirkman will take over Daniel Warren Johnson as writer of the new Transformers comic. So now he will be writing both Void Rivals and Transformers.
That's the
Well done.
the boys and or no, not the boys. That's Invincible and Walking Dead, right?
Walking. Yeah, yeah. So he's been writing Void Rivals since 2023, and now he'll be which was the start of the Energon universe, which he did that with his Oblivion song co-creator, Lorenzo Di Felici, which I just got through reading.
Hmm.
I fucking love Oblivion song.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a really cool sci-fi comic. And then they went on to do Void Rivals, which is another cool sci-fi comic that also involves Transformers. And now also G.I. Joe, because Cobra Law comes to the Sacred Ring, which is where Void Rivals takes place, which has a Transformers in a black hole. And so it's like a nice way of combining the lores and finding some way to put G.I. Joe characters out in space, even if it is the secret society of snake people.
I didn't think I was aware that Robert Kirkman had any sci-fi experience outside of the little bits that you would see inside of Invincible. So uh,
Yeah.
that makes me a little bit more comfortable that he's taking the reins on Transformers, knowing that this won't be his first run at a more
Well, yeah.
sci-fi heavy franchise.
Yeah, and then actually the Invincible comic, there's a crew called the Space Jet Crew, which are basically they're parodies of like the Star Trek Next Generation crew. They have not
Okay.
appeared in the show yet for whatever reason, but they were part of the comic. I was like, oh, as a Trekkie myself, I was like, oh, that's really cool. This is Picard and Data.
Yeah, I'm also just not caught up on the Invincible show. I do need to catch back up. I watched the first couple episodes of season two,
Mm-hmm.
and I just stopped for whatever reason. I think I was busy
Well,
with
there
other
was
stuff
also
at the time.
that mid-season break, which was dumb.
I don't even think I hit the mid-season break. I think I watched
Oh,
like 3 episodes of season two, and then just like other stuff was happening. That
yeah.
might have even been around the time I had to move. So,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I've seen all three seasons, and I've actually read up to where they are in the comic. So I've actually kind of passed where season three ends, but I haven't started where like the next season would begin.
okay.
But yeah, and I think that was it as far as news item goes. Like I know there's some Transformers movie news, but right now it's just rumors. Like there's a rumor going around that Kirkman's developing an animated Energon Universe series, but until that's confirmed, I don't want to officially say it. Like just like there's now a rumor that Michael Bay is directing another Transformers movie. Like
God,
I doubt that.
please, somebody make him stop.
Yeah, I doubt that because last night was such a colossal bomb. It lost $125 million, and that's why the franchise was recruited in the first place.
Good.
Granted, reboot, they had to repurpose Bumblebee from a prequel to the Bay film to a reboot, so that's why he still doesn't talk. He talks through like because it was like much like how Superman and Lois uses Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Oleg, even though it's not part of the Arrowverse. The new Transformers movies, they still do the same thing with Bumblebee. It's just now they're going in a different direction where Unicron is not Earth like it was last night. But if the rumors about him returning are true, god damn it, we're going to
Yeah.
be stuck with that shitty Unicron is secretly Earth plotline again.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so in Transformers The Last Night, it's revealed that Unicron is Earth.
No. Why? It's stupid.
I know, and so in Rise of the Beast, the climax is Unicron coming to Earth to try and devour it, and Optimus closes the portal. I'm gonna spoil it to keep Unicron out. I won't spoil what happens to the Terracons,
You
just
can
in case.
spoil all of these movies as far as I'm concerned because I'm not watching them.
Okay, well, so Optimus like closes the portal to prevent Unicron from devouring Earth in the climax of Rise of the Beast, which is that one's fine. One, it's not directed by Michael Bay, but two, I did enjoy it, and there is also a reveal that G.I. Joe is part of this new Transformers film franchise.
Okay.
I still say Bumblebee is a better movie, but Rise of the Beast was good, not great.
Yeah.
Unlike the Michael Bay films, which were all ranged from mediocre to downright awful.
Yeah, I would say like if I had to pick a quote unquote best one of the Michael Bay films, genuinely it was probably the first one because I think that one was the closest to like
Yeah.
keeping to the story of Transformers and he hadn't had as much time to fuck everything up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's either that one. I think Dark of the Moon had the best spectacle. I also have a bit of a soft spot for it because it has Leonard Nimoy as
I
the end.
Well, yes, that is nice. I just wasn't a fan of having to spend so much time on
Mhm.
the Sam is afraid of getting cucked plot line.
Oh yes, dear God, all the Sam stuff in all of those movies are terrible. It's like I was kind of relieved when we got paid in the fourth one because one, Mark Wahlberg's a better actor than Shia LaBeouf, but two, there is a bit more going on with him being an inventor. It's just everything else about the last two Michael Bay films was so much worse than in the original trilogy. Like Optimus hating humans for no reason and wanting the Decepticons to just take over because it's like, well, if the humans are building their own, we don't need to save this world anymore. Shit. And then evil Optimus and Transformers Fire.
Uh,
Now
terrible.
on to the Hopefully our news items didn't take up too much time.
Let's see. We are 20 minutes in.
Okay. Well, now let's go into the meat and potatoes of what we were set out to talk
Yeah.
about, with the Snake Eyes and the Ninja Force, which I kind of already did this at the top, where it's like that was what G.I. Joe was rebranded because the G.I. Joe team has a lot of sub teams, much like the Justice League, the Avengers, the Autobots, where there's the West Coast Avengers, New Avengers, Great Lakes Avengers, Mighty Avengers,
Right.
Justice League International, Young Justice. G.I. Joe has quite a few sub teams. One of those is the Ninja Force, which is led by Snake Eyes. And there's also Tiger Force, which is G.I. Joe, a jungle warfare unit, which uses repurposed Cobra vehicles. And they have like tiger stripe patterns on them, which combats Cobra's Python Patrol. And then there's Night Force, which just recently made their debut in the Energon universe, which is basically night ops, sort of like covert ops, whereas like the GI Joe team standard is like more special operations. So the Ninja Force is basically all the ninja characters on the GI Joe team into one team. Which I don't. Are you aware that Storm Shadow defects to GI Joe by chance?
I was not. I always just thought he was the evil ninja while Snake Eyes was the good one.
Well, yeah. So in the '80s cartoon, the Marvel Sunbow series, he is a villain. But this is one thing I had thought about when you had said you were coming up in the '90s, is that in the '90s, my first instinct was GI Joe Extreme, but it's like, wait, Cobra wasn't the bad guy in that. That was Scar, and it was basically Extreme was basically GI Joe's Beast Force, where it introduced a new conflict, set of characters that harken the like much like how the Beast Force character harken the G1/G2 characters. The
Mhm.
extreme G.I. Joe characters harken back to the real American hero characters, but they have different names. Like Lieutenant Stone is a Duke stand-in, and Scar is basically the Cobra stand-in for G.I. Joe Extreme, with Iron Claw as like the Cobra Commander character.
Wait,
And
hold on.
Scar,
They had a character called Lieutenant Stone.
yes.
I'm pretty sure that's a Ben 10 character too.
Well, yeah. Well, this was the '90s, so this predated Ben 10.
Yeah, no, 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 right. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if Ben 10 was purposefully making a G.I. Joe reference.
Well, yeah, it's hard to say because given that a lot of the people who worked on stuff like Ben 10 would be probably have been GI Joe fans. Like we just got through talking about Kirkman is a GI Joe and Transformers fan,
Yeah.
and in fact, he's been wanting to do GI Joe and Transformers since he came into the comic book world. Like he had proposed back in the early 2000s when like there was the Devil's Due Dreamwave split between the Transformers and GI Joe license. He wanted to do a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover where the Decepticons and Cobra have like a moon base, and the Autobots and the Joes have to just take out Cobra's moon base. But that never came to fruition. So now he's building his own shared universe with all these properties.
Okay. You know what? Good for him. I'm glad he
Yeah,
got there.
yeah,
Okay, so you were talking about like you're speculating what I might have seen about
yeah.
G.I.
So
Joe growing up. I will tell
yeah,
you the first like I'm sure I might have caught the odd rerun or whatever in passing of the old '80s cartoon. Like I think I specifically saw a couple episodes when I was over at my dad's house one time. Um,
yeah.
but but the first G.I. Joe thing that like I ever really like saw on my own purposefully was I think it was in early 2000s,
Sigma 6 by chance?
maybe. I just remember it was like it was on Cartoon Network, maybe Toonami, and it was like a reboot of the franchise. It was like more modern looking, darker colors. Um,
Was it
Cobra
anime?
Cobra Commander, he had like a different look. Like he was wearing like a draped hood kind of thing instead of just like a mask.
That would be Sigma 6 because it's like his helmeted look, but with like the cloth
Yeah.
mouthpiece that kind of looks like his hooded look. Which have you seen that one where it's like Lorenzo Di Bonaventura said it looked like a KKK hood.
Yeah, yeah, that rings a bell. I was gonna say it reminded me of like Baron Zemo's old
That's what
style.
I think of when I think of, or just anytime he wears a cloth mask, it looks like Baron Zemo. Like even like Reloaded has a bit more of like a ski mask look, but it's like that just looks like Baron Zemo's more recent design.
Yeah.
Which actually, his MCU look looks almost exactly like Cobra Commander in Reloaded.
Wow.
You just put a snake, the Cobra logo on that, and you have the Reloaded Cobra Commander.
I mean, I think it makes sense. You know, you got
Mhm.
one of the leaders of Hydra, the leader of Cobra. It's like, yeah, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Plus, you already have the Baroness, which is like basically a dead ringer to Madame Hydra.
Yeah, true.
And you also have Dr. Mindbender, who's obsessed with cloning tyrants throughout our history, much like Zola is obsessed with cloning Hitler himself.
All they got to do is put like a Colossus or an Ironclad or something on Hydra, and now, boom, now you got a Destro.
Yeah, I mean, Serpentor, he is a genetic clone of Genghis Khan, Ivan the Terrible, all these tyrants throughout history into one person. And so it's like they have like a dot dot dot. It's like it's the dot 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 Hitler, Stalin, and Mao because you don't want to say those names explicitly. You
Yeah,
do Vlad the Impaler, Ivan the Terrible, Genghis Khan, and all these other tyrants that people probably won't have any like take any offense to. And then you have like dot 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 for like modern tyrants whose relatives were probably killed by them.
just imagining a fusion of Ivan the Terrible and Genghis Khan is really funny because I can just picture it and being like, yes, here, why don't you take a drink? And just someone being like, oh, I'm not thirsty. And it's just like, well, I mean, okay, I'm just going to shoot you with an arrow then.
Yeah, well, it's like it's all one body, but like I think the cartoon and the Devil's Dude comic kind of played on how those like personalities within his psyche kind of are at war with each other at sometimes, where it's like he'll argue with himself because it's like Genghis Khan will want one thing and Vlad the Impaler will want something completely different. The more ring,
I'm so
yeah,
sorry to bring up Rick and Morty of all things, but it just sounds like the fucking Aberdolf Linkler
hmm
thing, where it's just like I'm so conflicted. Uh, I want to hate you, but also I think you should be free.
hmm but yeah, in the more recent comics, Dr. Mindbender just said, my previous Serpentor attempts failed, so I'm just going to clone Genghis Khan and call him Serpentor Khan. And then, and then that storyline recently resolved itself, and now there's like another like Serpentor clone in a test tube. But anyways, also Storm Shadow's DNA was used to create Serpentor. So back to the ninjas. Okay, so I do want to get on some real world history. So obviously last time we talked about Larry Hama and Rob Rudan, who are like the sort of creators of G.I. Joe. I also want to shout out Herb Trimpe, who illustrated the Unreal American Hero line, who is also one of the creators of Wolverine.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, Herb Trimpe, John Romita Sr., Glenn Wein, and Roy Thomas, they created Wolverine.
Romita
And
is a name that I know.
yes, he also, Romita Sr. created The Punisher with Jerry Conway.
Right.
Yeah, and Jerry Conway and John Romita Sr. had the Peter David, George Perez impact on Spider-Man to bring it back to one of our news items.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so basically Snake Eyes was designed by Ron Rudan, then named by Larry Hama, and Larry Hama basically wanted him to be like this silent character. So when we open the pages of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero, we see this cool black costume character drawn by Herb Trimpe, who would do a lot of badass at the beginning, it was mostly just commando stuff. Like the ninja aspect came in 93, 94, 83, 84. But he did a lot of like covert ops, behind the scenes espionage. And in fact, in G.I. Joe issue 4, we actually get an internal monologue of him because in this issue, the GI Joe team is sent to stop Strike First, which is basically Larry Hama doing the Proud Boys before the Proud Boys were even a thing. It was this group of like militant people who saw themselves as true patriots trying to overthrow the government and install like a Trumpian fascist order. This was 82. So they steal a nuke that is allegedly loaned to him by Cobra. And so
Of
Snake Eyes,
course.
he has this internal monologue about how these people aren't actually patriots. They think of themselves as patriots. They're like, and basically going on about like what he does for a living. And he doesn't actually speak. It's just an internal like thought monologue. And so that's like the first glance we get into Snake Eyes as an actual character. And then later on, Dr. Venom would abduct Snake Eyes and subject him to psychological torture with the brainwave scanner. So we get bits and pieces of his backstory sprinkled in there as when Dr. Venom has Snake Eyes as a prisoner. But we really don't know much about him, but we like him because he's this cool looking character who does a bunch of badass shit, right?
Right.
As a commando. And so in I want to say 83, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, 21 comes out, which is the silent interlude, which I don't know if you've ever, I doubt you would have heard of this comic, but it's one of a groundbreaking comic, not just in G.I. Joe, but in comics in general, because it has no dialogue whatsoever. It's
I
just,
was just thinking that, like, okay, I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, I, with Snake Eyes being a silent character, I think it would be a really cool idea if there was an entire comic where it was like
mhm.
silent.
Yes. So the entire comic, there's like, the only words we see are like danger, like on a computer screen, or like file. But it's effectively Snake Eyes goes into Scotland, Castle Destro, to rescue Scarlet, who's taken prisoner by Storm Shadow. And so Storm Shadow, at this point, he had made like a few cameo appearances in the comic. He was mostly used in the 83 Marvel cartoon.
Mhm.
But in this issue, we actually get like a deep dive into like Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, where it's like Snake Eyes goes into Castle Destro to free Scarlet, and Destro and Cobra Commander have like their security team look out for Snake Eyes because he'd be coming to rescue Scarlet. But at this point, we weren't fully invested in the Scarlet Snake Eyes love story, but there was implications that they had something between them. And so Snake Eyes basically he goes in, Storm Shadow unleashes his Red Ninja clan to help fight off Snake Eyes. And so the issue ends with a battle between Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, and both of their wrists get cut. And so we get this reveal of the Arashikage hexagram that both Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow have tattooed on their wrist. And that's sort of the sort of pinpoint of like where the idea of them being rivals comes from is the comic. Because I told you last time in the cartoon, we didn't get a whole lot of Snake Eyes Storm Shadow fights because one, an all black character design was hard to animate in the 80s. Two, they needed another voice actor for Storm Shadow's voice actor to match wits with. And so Spirit was his rival in the cartoon, but in the comic, the Snake Eyes Storm Shadow rivalry was put front and center with issue 21. And
Okay.
also, I think their action figure file cards mentioned them being, which if you've ever picked up an action figure and noticed a character description, you can thank G.I. Joe toy line for that because after G.I. Joe, almost every like adjacent like Marvel, DC, Transformers, He-Man, Mask, toy line had to give the characters a file card. And
Yeah,
also,
I do remember one of my earliest toys was an old X-Men action figure, and I don't even remember what happened to the figure. I just remember I still had the card uh
yes.
after I
So
lost it.
I actually, somewhere I have my Marvel Legends Punisher file card, which Marvel Legends was the birth of the 6-inch action figure, I want to say, where it was highly detailed. Now there's even a G.I. Joe. It's called Classified, but it's effectively Marvel Legends for G.I. Joe because now Hasbro is doing Marvel Legends because Toy Biz went under in 2005. After it was rebranded Marvel Toys, that's when it goes under and Hasbro buys the Marvel toy license and buys Marvel Legends explicitly. And so they've been doing Marvel Legends since 2006. And as of 2020, they now do a G.I. Joe Marvel Legends line called G.I. Joe Classified. But that's beside the point. And they're even doing a retro carded line to harken back to the Hector Dorito. I think you've seen these with the character with the explosion in the background. Snake Eyes is him holding his Uzi and pointing in the air with an explosion behind him. That's a that those were all Hector Dorito paintings.
Okay.
You, but yeah, so back to like where it's like I believe since Hama actually wrote the file cards, and on the Transformers side, Bob Budiansky, who wrote the Transformers comic, wrote the tech spec for the Transformers toys. So more of that Marvel Hasbro synergy to basically see, yeah, we have this contract with Kenner, but we want your properties to sell comics for. And so that was one of the things where it's like their writers would actually come up with the file cards for the toys and for Transformers and G.I. Joe, who were writing the actual comics to help
I,
maintain consistency.
I do feel like that idea to have little bio cards for all these
Mhm.
characters is honestly kind of a lifesaver, especially if you're someone who's um like okay, so I was a kid with a million questions growing up, and I would
Mhm.
ask my mom everything, and she would get so like frustrated because like she didn't know the answer to a lot of the questions I would ask. Like, and sometimes I'd ask like, "Who's this character? What do they do?" And I'm sure it was probably a lifesaver for parents for them to be able to like grab these cards and be like, "Here's what this says. This is what this character does. This is what they like to eat."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where it's like
Because when
you just pick up.
there's a million different characters in the cast, it's like it's hard for
Oh,
even hardcore fans to remember them all.
yes. I mean, that's one of the things Robert Kirkman talked about with the Energon universe, as well as like his collaborators like Daniel Warren Johnson and Joshua Williams. Is like these are franchises where every character is someone's favorite. Like there will be someone whose favorite character is a GI Joe character, is someone obscure like Black Dragon from GI Joe Extreme. It's like who is the Snake Eyes stand-in in the Extreme era? Though Black Dragon spoke, unlike Snake Eyes.
I was gonna say Black Dragon is a sick name, so
Well, yes, yes, and my instinct is always to think of the red, the Great Red Dragon. It's like, no, this is Black Dragon, not Red Dragon. Are you familiar with that painting by William Blake?
uh what, the Great Red Dragon?
Yeah. Um,
Uh that's not was that in fucking Hannibal?
yes, that's where the name of the novel Red Dragon comes from. And
Okay.
then the film with Edward Norton is what that novel was an adaptation of that novel. Also,
Okay.
there was a film in the 80s called Manhunter, which was also an adaptation of the Red
Yes.
Dragon novel.
Yes, I
And
do
actually,
know about that.
yes, my edition of Red Dragon, that's the cover art, is William Blake's painting. Because
Okay.
I know you're not a horror fan, but I am a horror movie buff. So,
I'm really glad I got that right because I was like, this is the only Red Dragon thing that I know. I hope this is it.
yes. So that's like anytime there's like a color predating the word dragon, my mind goes to it, even if the color isn't red.
I get that.
But yeah, so Black Dragon was like the Snake Eyes for Extreme. But so back to like a real American hero. So that little hexagram that appears on both Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes' wrist would lay the foundations for the two-part origin story in G.I. Joe 26 and 27, which sort of establishes that Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow both served in the Vietnam War. They were both Storm Shadow was a Japanese American who enlisted in the American military, and Snake Eyes was just a white American. And Stalker, who was a member of the G.I. Joe team, was also in their unit. So you had an Asian man, a black guy, and a white guy who fought alongside each other, who survived the horrific circumstances of Vietnam. And the three of them basically became brothers, like symbolically, not actually, but the three of them were like brothers to each other. And so when they went home, they had to go their separate ways because they lived like Storm Shadow. Not Stalker was from the South. I want to say Alabama or the more I think about it, it might be Georgia. I'll have to double check.
Can I
But
ask real
mhm.
quick? I don't know anything about the Stalker character. I assume he also wears a ninja outfit.
No, actually, he's a. I don't know if you've seen a black guy with like a ranger beret,
Maybe. I don't know. Again, it's hard to keep track of all the G.I. Joe characters for me.
but yeah,
Um,
he's not a ninja. He does know some martial arts because he served alongside Storm Shadow, which in the military, like the Vietnam War stuff, Storm Shadow was the only one with like any like martial arts training. Snake Eyes would get that post Vietnam because, as I'll get into him in a minute, he would go on after the Vietnam War to go to the Arashikage clan, which is where that hexagram that appears on both of their wrists comes from, to
okay.
train with Storm Shadow. But like, so Stalker, he goes home to his wife and kids. Storm Shadow's family finds him at the airport and they take him back to Tokyo. And Snake Eyes is left there alone. And then Clayton Abernathy, who is General Hawk in the G.I. Joe team, comes to approach Snake Eyes to inform him that his father and his sister were killed in a car accident. So he is now has no family. And so that actually sends Snake Eyes, as we would learn later, and in Brendan Jerwash's G.I. Joe Declassified, it explores on this a bit more, where Snake Eyes eventually becomes a vigilante for a brief period of time, who would basically roam the streets because in his grief of losing his twin sister and his parents, he basically found like solace in vigilantism. And he would undertake an apprentice, who this apprentice would go on to become Cobra Commander.
Oh wait,
And
what?
yes, so I think this is in the Snake Eyes trilogy, which is in like the issue like 80s, 90s, I think, where Snake Eyes was a vigilante. And basically, this failed used car salesman sort of learns about this vigilante in, I want to say, New York. And so he basically wants to become Snake Eyes' apprentice. And so they fight, and the Snake Eyes Declassified that Brandon Jerwell wrote in the early 2000s sort of has like Cobra Commander and Snake Eyes going around fighting crime as vigilantes. However, they do have a falling out because it turns out Cobra Commander's brother was the driver who killed Snake Eyes' sister and his parents. And so Snake Eyes knows that Cobra Commander's brother is guilty of the crime he's gone to prison for. But Cobra Commander cannot accept that whatsoever. And so they have a falling out. And that's what leads Cobra Commander to become a terrorist in the,
I didn't even know that those two like ever even spoke to each other or something. I didn't realize their backstories were that closely like
yeah.
intertwined.
So this is one of the things about particularly Larry Hama's G.I. Joe, is there are a lot of connections, and it's the stuff that's like, I just fucking love it when you can tie so many characters into this backstory where it's like, so Cobra Commander's brother killed Snake Eyes' sister and parents, and they were also like this Batman and Robin duo, and then they have a falling out that leads Commander down a path of villainy. But
That's
after like
crazy.
Snake Eyes is basically run as a vigilante, Storm Shadow catches up to him, Thomas Arashikage, and offers to take him to Japan to the Arashikage clan to teach him martial arts training. So this is where Snake Eyes' ninja skills come in. And so they come back to Japan, which the Snake Eyes movie kind of does this, where he's not a vigilante, but he's like a mole inside the Yakuza, and Storm Shadow is also a different mole. And so basically when Snake Eyes is ordered to kill Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes chooses not to kill him. And they go back to Japan and Storm Shadow brings him into the Arashikage clan. Though all these reactionary fanboys were mad about casting Henry Golding as Snake Eyes because he's a biracial actor. His father is English and his mother is Malaysian, but it's like, Snake Eyes is white! How dare you race swap Snake Eyes? It's like, does a white guy need to be a ninja
Yeah, I
commander?
was gonna say, like, I
He
didn't,
doesn't
but when you
speak.
were like Snake Eyes is white, I was like, that seems wrong, but okay.
Well, yeah, Snake Eyes, for the most part, has been white. There was actually, in G.I. Joe Reloaded, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are half brothers. So it's like, the Snake Eyes movie was not the first time that they went with like a biracial Snake Eyes. There's this run from the early 2000s where Snake Eyes is also biracial. But anyways, so Storm Shadow, he brings Snake Eyes into the Arashikage clan to teach him martial arts to basically, because he sort of figures out that Snake Eyes has lost people true, near and dear to him. And so he finds that maybe Snake Eyes can find solace in martial arts. And so he takes him back to the Arashikage clan, which is his family clan, because Storm Shadow is Tomosoro or Thomas Arashikage. His last name is Arashikage, which is Japanese for Storm Shadow.
Okay. I knew
And
Kage
so,
was like was Shadow, but what is it?
mhm,
Arsha?
yeah, Arashikage.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Snake Eyes, his real name is classified, but we know Storm Shadow's secret identity.
Okay.
And so Snake Eyes trains with the Hard Master and the Soft Master, who are Storm Shadow's uncles. And so that he actually begins to exceed Storm Shadow in training with the Arashikage clan. And Storm Shadow also has a cousin, Jinx, who is part of the Arashikage clan. Now there is one ninja character who's not part of the Arashikage clan. His name is Quick Hit. Larry Hama didn't use him much in the comic, but he actually trained with Shang-Chi in the original Marvel series. Now this was established in the Action Force comics, which were then reprinted in G.I. Joe European Mission. I don't know if the Quick Hit trained with Shang-Chi comic actually was reprinted in European missions, but I know for a fact it's in one of the Action Force issues from Marvel UK. But I believe he is part of the Ninja Force in the actual toy line and maybe the D cartoon, but he was killed off in the comic before Ninja Force was ever a thing. But he is one ninja character I wanted to highlight simply because of that Shang-Chi connection.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's cool. If you're going to have a any sort of crossover, it makes sense to have a uh ninja character be connected with the greatest martial artist.
Yes. Though I will say it was a huge missed opportunity to not throw Captain America in the Marvel run at some point.
Wait,
Because
they
like I've
did?
always viewed they did not ever do anything with G.I. Joe
That
and
seems
Captain
like such
America.
an obvious slam dunk.
Yeah, my guess is Larry probably just wasn't interested in doing anything like that, and none of like the other fill-in writers ever decided, why don't we just do an issue with Captain America? Because there were other writers who worked on the A Real American Hero run and Special Missions when like Larry had to do other things. Like Larry also wrote a celebrated run on Wolverine, which one of the things that Hama pointed out about the credits for Deadpool and Wolverine is that his name does not appear, even though he wrote the first time Wolverine met Deadpool.
Wow.
So it's like, I'm being systematically erased by Marvel. Though he does appear in the credits for Venom: The Last Dance because he came up with the Xenophage with the symbiote. So he does get a special thanks in the third Venom movie for
Oh, what?
something something less significant than Deadpool and Wolverine.
I mean, it's nice that he at least got some recognition.
Yeah, it's still not. He had a cameo in the Snake Eyes movie. I think I mentioned that, where Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes they're in keeping tabs on Kenta, who's part of the Yakuza, and Larry Hama's just walking down the street, and he looks at the camera smiling, and then we get some action, which is cool fight choreography, undermined by shaky cam.
Uh,
Yeah, and also in the Snake Eyes movie, Snake Eyes is played for a chump by Cobra, so his purpose in the Arashikage clan is to steal the Jewel of the Sun. And then because he wants to get his father's killer. And then once he realized that the person who killed his father was working for Cobra because his father was part of G.I. Joe. That's like, what? You lied to me, Baroness and Kenta? Well, now I have to make things right with the Arashikage. And so that's how the climax ensues.
hmm.
Is Yeah, it's like this is the best of the G.I. Joe movies, but it's still not a good movie. It's not like Bumblebee, which is a legitimately good movie. It's like this is better than Spy Kids with adult leads and an incoherent mess of a film. Which there is some cool action and retaliation, but it's still like there's so much pacing that's off, and it's also like they do the whole Storm Shadow redemption arc in retaliation, but it's like he was a mustache twirly villain in the first movie, and now you're expecting me to think that there was something sympathetic about this character.
Not Spy
It
Kids catching a stray.
yeah, but anyway, so Snake, back to like the comic origin, Snake Eyes starts to actually outperform Storm Shadow as a martial artist. And so Storm Shadow does get a little jealous, but they still see each other as sword brothers. And this is one of the things that I think Snake Eyes did well, the movie, was there's a scene, I think this is mostly on the part of the actors, because I think the writing, given what I just told you, was poor writing and direction, but I think Henry Golding and Andrew Koji did a really good job with this scene, where Snake Eyes offers him his sword and basically cuts himself, and then Storm Shadow cuts himself with the sword, and they hold hands with their bloody hands to establish
Uh,
themselves as
Blood Brothers.
sword brothers.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it's part of Snake Eyes' ploy to steal the Jewel of the Sun. God damn it! Why did you fucking come up with this plotline?
Uh,
You could have actually had a compelling like Snake Eyes origin story. You know, you could do what the Punisher did and make Storm Shadow Snake Eyes and Stalker, who's not even in the movie. Which, if you did your homework, you flunked horribly if you didn't put Stalker in this movie. Just make them Afghanistan or Iraq War veterans, much like the Punisher show did, making the Punisher an Afghanistan veteran as opposed to a Vietnam veteran. But they didn't do that.
yeah, I mean, it's one of the benefits of one of the incredibly minor benefits of living in our shitty world is that at least with our characters who all have an origin in some kind
Mhm.
of war, as long as we keep fighting wars, then we can keep modernizing those characters by just changing what war they fought in.
Yes, and particularly if it's a war that's like used to communicate like trauma and horrors of war. You can you can always pick off these offensive wars the U.S. waged, whereas Captain America, you have to use the one defensive war and just prolong how long he's been frozen in ice.
Yeah,
But hey, U.S. Agent, you can make him a modern war because his military background is part of the reason he is a bit of a loose cannon.
yeah. I'm gonna say this real quick too. Uh, my boy John, they gotta stop being so fucking mean to him. He doesn't deserve all the hate.
Yeah, he's not a villain. He's an anti-hero at
Even
best.
then, like I
Yeah, he's
feel like
not the Punisher.
he's an anti-hero because of circumstance, not
Yeah.
necessarily because of who he is. Like the the shit that he did in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, if you really look back at it, it's just like he didn't really do anything all that wrong. He kind of
Yeah.
just did what Captain America already does. He just did it a
hmm
little too publicly.
And a little too brutally too. I mean, Captain America never smashed a guy's head with his shield to the point where blood's
He
like
did
if you were
kick
to
a
do
guy into the railing of a ship and break his spine
that
and
is
let him
true.
drown to death.
Yeah, that is true. It's just Captain
It was
America never
nice
went.
though. Nobody saw
Yeah,
it.
yeah. No one saw all the blood and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas like you clearly saw. Obviously, it wasn't TVMA, so you couldn't see the guy's crushed skull with blood splattered everywhere.
I don't think it was
But
his
you saw
skull. I
the
think it was his chest because
oh,
it was the same move that
Cap
Steve
did on
did
Iron
to
Man
take out Tony's arc reactor.
too. Yeah. Anyways, from one patriotic, not nationalist franchise to another patriotic that is not national franchise.
Yes.
So, and during this time when Snake Eyes is with the Arashikage, Zartan and Firefly are sent by Cobra Commander to kill Snake Eyes. And so, at first, we're led to believe that, so we see that an arrow is shot at Snake Eyes, but it's actually the Hardmaster who is mimicking Snake Eyes' heartbeat. And so we see the arrow and we assume, because we've seen Storm Shadow carry the same bow and arrow, that it is Storm Shadow who killed the Hardmaster thinking he was Snake Eyes in an act of revenge. But then we are later learned that Zartan, the Master of the Skies, was impersonating Storm Shadow. And so he had framed Storm Shadow for the murder of the Hard Master. And in fact, the Soft Master sort of went on an investigation because he felt there's no way Storm Shadow would have defended his innocence so hardly if he had actually killed his own uncle. So he began to deduce that Storm Shadow was framed for the murder of the Hard Master. And sure enough, we find out that Zartan, in fact, killed the Hard Master, pretending to be Storm Shadow. But later on, we learned that even though Zartan was disguised as Storm Shadow, Zartan's marksman skills aren't that good, so it was actually Firefly who shot the arrow that killed the Hard Master, and that Zartan was just disguised as Storm Shadow to flee the scene and
Jeez.
pin the murder of the Hard Master on Storm Shadow. And so Storm Shadow's reasoning for being in Cobra in the comic was he wanted revenge, and he wanted to find out which one of these Cobra agents was responsible for the murder of his uncle. And during the Softmaster's investigation, he is also killed in an explosion set off by Scrap Iron, who is another Cobra agent, who is also part of Destro's Iron Grenadiers. So eventually, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow heed out the fact that Zartan killed the Hard Master, and then Snake Eyes helps Storm Shadow get out of Cobra and join G.I. Joe. And so this is pre-Ninja Force, but this is when all the ninjas started consolidating into one like team. So we have Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow on a team, and then later on, Jinx, Storm Shadow's cousin, joins this team, and Scarlet also ends up as part of this team because she is Snake Eyes' love interest, and she does have a lot of martial arts training. So
Okay.
that before we get there, after the attempt on Snake Eyes, which resulted in the murder of the Hard Master, Snake Eyes leaves the Arashikage clan because he thought that maybe his sword brother had actually betrayed him. Two, he knew that even if it wasn't Storm Shadow, there's a target on his back, and that being part of this ninja clan made it his whereabouts too known. So he basically went off and found himself a cabin in the woods, and eventually took on a timber wolf as his pet, which that is Timber, which I think one of my who would win battles was Batman and Ace versus Timber and Snake Eyes.
I
But that
remember
is,
that. Yeah.
yeah, that is sort of how Timber came to be in the comic. In the cartoon, Snake Eyes in the premiere of the cartoon, Snake Eyes takes one of the uranium ores Destro was using to make the mass device, which is a teleportation device Cobra was planning to use to teleport bombs into buildings to commit acts of terrorism. But anyways, Snake Eyes is infected with this radiation, and a bear tries to eat like an unconscious Snake Eyes, and Timber comes to Snake Eyes' rescue. And eventually Snake Eyes is cured of the radiation, and he decides to take Timber as his pet. So that's his origin in the cartoon. His origin in the comic is a bit more mundane, but eventually, when General Hawk is putting together the original G.I. Joe team, which I told you about last time, which was led by Hawk, included Scarlet, Stalker, Grunt, Rock and Roll, Short Fuse, Zap, Flash, and Clutch. He recruits Snake Eyes, and in one of their early missions, one of their helicopters is shot down. And so all the Joes are getting out of the helicopter, but Scarlet is trapped inside. And so Snake Eyes comes to her rescue, and the canopy explodes in Snake Eyes' face, shredding his vocal cords and disfiguring him, which is why he doesn't speak and why he mostly wears a mask.
Mm.
Because he could actually speak, and in fact, I think in the Snake Eyes trilogy, he does speak, and I think the Snake Eyes trilogy is also where his name comes from, which is his father, when Snake Eyes is going to war, says, eventually you'll run out of luck in war and you'll only be left with Snake Eyes, which is where his name comes from. I want to say that was in the Snake Eyes trilogy. I know for a fact it's in Snake Eyes Declassified by Brandon Jerwa. But so he could speak, which is another thing people were complaining about with the Snake Eyes movie. It's like, why is Snake Eyes showing his face and talking? He's not supposed to do that. It's like, well, this is his origin. So he did speak, and he did talk before he lost his vocal cords and all that. Now, in the other two live action movies, he just takes a vow of silence, which is like, come on, you have this badass origin of him taking an explosion to the face, and you just want to have him take a vow of silence because of the Hardmaster's death, which is also another thing about those two live action movies. The Hardmaster is killed when Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are kids, and Zartan was pretending to be the Soft Master, but they blame Storm Shadow for his death because he used a replica of Storm Shadow's sword to kill the Hardmaster. It doesn't make sense.
Uh, yeah, that seems a lot less compelling.
Yes. So that's sort of the reason Snake Eyes doesn't speak is because he can't in most continuities. The the first two live action movies are the only continuity where he takes a vow of silence, at least to my knowledge.
I definitely thought that he was just a quiet guy, like with a vow of
Well, yeah.
silence. I didn't realize it was like a literal physical impairment.
Well, even when he could speak, he didn't speak a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Drive, where Ryan Gosling, he for the most part doesn't speak in the movie, but he can and will speak if he needs to. But he typically chooses not to speak in that movie, which I think could have been an interesting way to approach a Snake Eyes origin film. Paramount and did not approach it that way. But it's like if Snake Eyes he's mostly calm and quiet, but he will speak if there's any need for him, and then you can have the explosion cuts his vocal cord origin for him.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so that's why he doesn't speak. Also, he wears a mask to conceal all of his scars, and so very few people have seen what he looks like under the mask. And in fact, there is a panel in I think the Snake Eyes trilogy where we do see he basically looks like Jigsaw from Punisher, where he has this huge gaping scar all over his face, and one of his eyes is bulging because like his eyelids were destroyed in the explosion.
Ugh.
But yes, few people have seen what he looks like under the mask. I think it's just Duke, Hawk, Stalker, and Scarlet and Storm Shadow have seen him with. Oh, and technically Cobra Commander has seen him without his mask on because in the basically the wrap up of the Cobra War in the Marvel run, Cobra Commander has a device that's controlling all the ninjas, and so Snake Eyes basically embodies the commando of him. By this point, he's had reconstructive surgery, so he doesn't have all the scarring on his face.
Hmm.
But he goes in basically full commando, like he has like the Punisher bandana thing he had in like the 80s and 90s on his head,
Right.
with like paint on his face. So he's not wearing a mask, but he goes in to basically to attempt to free Storm Shadow from Cobra Commander's control. He doesn't succeed in that regard, but he does take down Cobra Commander. And then Hawk contacts Joe Colton, the character G.I. Joe, to launch a satellite laser to basically isolate Cobra Island from the rest of the world. And then there are these two one-off issues before the final issue, which is the letter from Snake Eyes I told you last time, where basically the Joes take out some remaining Cobra units. Like Roadblock takes down a Cobra airliner, and Scarlet takes down a Bat unit, which Bats are battle android troopers. They're basically Cobra robots that Cobra sends to do battle. In addition to all the Vipers, which are there, then they're just standard infantrymen. And then Cobra also has the Crimson Guard, which is like the Cobra Honor Guard. And so I think I've gone through basically all of Snake Eyes' origin story, or because the last pillar was the scarring trauma of him losing his voice, and then he takes on the Snake Eyes costume, the all black commando outfit with just a pair of goggles before he gets the visor lift, which I take it you're more familiar with, where he has like a visor on his where his eyes are.
Yes, that's what I know of him.
Mm-hmm. Because prior to that, he had just like a pair of black goggles, which is a lot of people call that like the Alpha Commando Snake Eyes. Like in the classified toy line, there was the Alpha Commando Snake Eyes with Timber 2-pack. And then they did the retro line with the Hector Garrido explosion painting, which was a new version of the commando look that harkened back to his original like toy. Which I will point this out, the original Snake Eyes toy was all black, simply so Hasbro wouldn't have to paint anything on the toy.
Classic.
So the actual like O-ring figures back in the day were these black pieces of plastic that were molded to look like a character. It's like, what's the most cost-effective way of making characters? Give them an all black suit, and lo and behold, the most cost-efficient toy ends up being the most popular character in the franchise's history. The only character this day and age to get his own movie.
I mean,
He,
sometimes simplicity sells. I think
yeah, definitely.
uh, there is a weird psychological phenomenon where the more of a void a character is, the
Mm-hmm.
more popular they can become because so many people can project themselves and their ideals onto that character. It's the same
Yeah,
reason why they made Master Chief from Halo barely have any personality or speaking lines in the original
yeah.
games.
Or your silent protagonists in games like Half-Life or Portal, or I don't think
Yeah,
of other Call of. There are plenty of Call of Duties with silent protagonists.
I was just playing Persona 5, the Phantom X, which just came out.
Mm,
The Persona protagonists are another good example. I think they tread a good halfway point because
mm,
technically you can pick different, dialogue options and
yeah,
inject your own style onto them, but
hmm
there is usually what's considered like a canon personality for each of them,
yeah,
and that's one of the voice line routes or whatever you want to call it that you can pick for each
hmm
of them. So in like anime and whatnot, they behave with a defined personality.
yeah,
But you can still sort of treat them as you want. So I, I
yeah.
think I think it makes sense that Snake Eyes would become super popular because for one, ninjas are just fucking cool. Uh,
Yes, he's a
and
ninja commando too, so it's like he uses both ninja weapons and like modern military style weapons, sort
yeah,
of like Deadpool. Which, by the way, Rob Liefeld has stated that because he was the artist who created Deadpool. I think Fabian Mass, whoever, was the writer behind the New Mutants line, so he was the other creator of Deadpool. But given that Liefeld was the artist, he's sort of gone on record in saying, "Yeah, Snake Eyes was one of my inspirations for Deadpool." Which, given where the two characters are now, Deadpool is like complete opposite of Snake Eyes.
yeah. But
Which,
I do know Deadpool started off as a much more serious, gritty character.
yeah, I mean, he'll deny it to the end of time that Deathstroke was an influence on Deadpool, but it's like his name is Wade Wilson and Deathstroke is Slade Wilson.
Wait, he
Even if it,
denies? I thought that was the point, was that he was always a parody of Deathstroke.
uh, maybe from the writer's angle, I'd have to double check on who his name, but I'm pretty sure his first name is like Fabian. But he was probably approaching this character as like a Deathstroke knockoff. But Rob Liefeld will tweet out, there is absolutely 0% of Deathstroke in Deadpool. And people are like clowning on him. He's like,
Okay, buddy. Like, man, Rob Liefeld, every time I hear about him, I'm just like, this guy fucking sucks.
yes, he when he sort of said that Snake Eyes was an inspiration for Deadpool, it was when he was doing the Snake Eyes Dead Game series, which is it's like its own like Elseworlds continuity where Snake Eyes is going under a trial by Norse gods, and the sort of penultimate issue has Snake Eyes pick up Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer, because there's like a corresponding story with not the Marvel comic story, but the actual Norse mythology Thor that's like paralleling what Snake Eyes is doing.
Okay.
And it's like, and so it's actually a cool image to see Snake Eyes pick up Thor's hammer. And even though like I know people clown on Liefeld's art, I do think by this point he has sort of refined his style, so he's not drawing Captain America with a 1,000,000 foot high chest. So his
Yeah.
artwork is a little better by 2020, 21, but it's still like this series is so all over the place. Like the character G.I. Joe is freed in the first issue, and then we get Bullet Man and Atomic Man from the Adventure Team, and then they just kind of fuck off and go. And then Destro and the Baroness show up, then they disappear. Roadblock and Scarlet are also there, and they disappear. It's like, what is going on? And there's like Storm Shadow versus Snake Eyes, and then Storm Shadow teams up with Snake Eyes, and it's just like eventually it just concludes with Snake Eyes killing the Midgard serpent with Thor's hammer. So it's like, whatever. It's a Rob Liefeld. I think Chad Bowers did his best to try and make cohesion because he actually wrote the dialogue, but it's like this. It's very much written in like the Marvel method, where it's guided by the artist.
Yeah.
What the art, which is
What
why like people like Alan Moore are very critical of Stan Lee for undervaluing what Jack Kirby's input on X-Men and Fantastic Four and Steve Ditko, where it's like, I don't know if you saw the Jonathan Ross interview where it's like, the guy who created it in his head is the person who created it. But, I guess I'll consider Steve Ditko a co-creator. He won't just say Steve Ditko created Spider-Man with me. He has to do all this mental gymnastics to explain why he created Spider-Man and he alone created Spider-Man. But, I'll say that Steve Ditko co-created it to make Steve Ditko feel good.
I feel like comic book writers are they just seem to have such fragile egos about this sort of stuff because like it's the
Mm-hmm.
same shit with like the fucking Bob Kane and Bill Finger stuff. It's like,
Well, yes. Well, actually, Bob Kane was the artist. Bill Finger was the writer. But it's the same idea, where it's
well,
like
okay,
Bob
I
Kane.
was I was using writers as like a
But yeah,
creators. I
no,
should have
I
said
get
I
where
should have
you're
said
coming.
creators.
Yeah, yeah, because and in the case of Bob Kane and Bill Finger was hired as a ghostwriter by Kane and his and DC, so he didn't even have a byline. Which that's what kind of makes the Batman situation the most egregious was that here Bill Finger as the writer came up with so much of this. And obviously, Bob Kane, he's still a co-creator, so he was still the artist, so he drew these characters. So it's like, when people say Bob Kane did nothing for Batman, it's like, let's be objective. Yes, he was a scumbag. Yes, he had a massive ego. Yes, what he did to Bill Finger was screwy. He still drew these comics.
Yeah,
He
I don't
could,
get behind the idea that he didn't add anything of value to the character, but um
he was a
because
total
he clearly
scumbag.
did. He was a very important part of creating the character, but
Mm-hmm.
to act like he was the only moving part in this machine, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's fucked up. And
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that Bill Finger is getting more recognition for his work these days.
Yeah. I would like to see H.D. Peter credited as a creator of Wonder Woman. Because if you've seen any Wonder Woman thing, it still says Wonder Woman created by William Moulton Marston, not Wonder Woman created by William Moulton Marston and Harry G. Peter. So I would like H.D. Peter to get the Bill Finger treatment. It was like an officially recognized co-creator.
Yeah, I
I
do
mean,
think
it
it's
took,
very important to credit creators appropriately, especially because comics is such a long running industry that a lot of these
yeah,
people aren't with us anymore. And
mm,
to, uh, if we don't credit them, then their names can wind up being forgotten to time.
yeah.
And,
And I think the
that'd be
most
just a
egregious
shame.
things are like Venom created by Marvel Comics. Okay, the industry, the company Marvel Comics didn't come up with Venom. I forget who the writers of the Secret Wars are, but there's obviously Todd McFarlane, who came up with the name Venom and the character of Venom as we know him, with the big tongue, the sharp teeth. But obviously, Venom predated that because originally it was Spider-Man's black suit. And Todd McFarlane eventually came up with the idea that it was this evil alien trying to possess Peter because he wanted Spider-Man to come back to the red and blue suit that he knew growing up as a child. And so that's how Venom became more than just this black suit Spider-Man wore. It became this symbiotic entity, was Todd's desire to put Spider-Man back in the red and blue suit.
Yeah, yeah, I
And that's
agree.
why
That clearly played a big part in it.
yeah. And that's why I do like that comic book movies are not only doing, they've obviously been doing like the creative credits, like based on Marvel Comics by Stan Lee, which would then later became based on Marvel Comics by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, so that Steve Ditko would be a recognized creator. But I also do like the special things because even though like Stan Lee and Steve Ditko created Spider-Man, who truly defined it was Jerry Conway and John Romita Sr. In the same way Bill Finger and Bob Kane created Batman. The true auteurs behind what Batman is today were Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, who created characters like Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul, depending on which character creator you ask, because Neil Adams says Ra's al Ghul is correct, while Denny O'Neil says Ra's al Ghul is correct.
Yeah.
Which,
I just tend to call him Raish because the properties that I like more call him that.
mhm,
Uh, Batman Begins is fine, but it's part of a trilogy that I'm not a big fan of, so I'm not. I don't tend to stick with Ra's al Ghul too much.
yeah, in fairness, the first exposure I had to that character was Batman Begins, so Roz is beaten into my brain. Also, when I look at the reasoning behind why Neil Adams says Roz is correct, his reasoning is actually more sound because Raz Al Ghul is Arabic for the demon's head, and so he's using the native tongue of where the phrase originates as to why that's correct. Whereas Denny O'Neil is like, my daughter asked her psychology professor, who has a minor in linguistics, how to pronounce it. And she came back and said it was race. It's based on Hebrew. It's like, wait, Hebrew is written, not spoken. Oken. Whereas, and also the translation in Hebrew is Rosh Demosa or something like that. So it's not even Raz Al Ghul.
Wait,
Whereas Neil Adams is using Arabic, the native tongue, to justify why it's Raz Al Ghul.
Hebrew isn't spoken?
No, Yiddish is the spoken Jewish language.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you ever
I'd like to
translate
go on
anything,
record that I'm not Jewish and I don't know many Jewish people, so I,
yeah,
I just,
see,
I
I'm not
don't
Jewish
know.
either. I'm not Jewish either, but I did take a Jewish history class in university. So I
Okay.
actually learned a lot about Jewish history and sort of like, and one of the topics we did go on to is the divide amongst Jews around Israel Palestine, where there are a lot of like Jewish people who are actually very sympathetic towards the Palestinians and very anti-Israel's government. So it's like,
Yeah,
oh, so it's not actually anti-Semitic to criticize the Jewish government.
it never was. Okay, like, okay, since we're on that topic now, it's very frustrating whenever I hear the argument brought up that, oh, if you are critical of Israel committing mass genocide, then you're anti-Semitic. It's like, no, because one, a government is not the
It's not
same as the entire culture.
mhm. In the
And,
same way that
and
Saudi
there's,
Arabia's government is not indicative of Sunni Muslims.
yeah, there's so many people, fucking, I'm white, and do you think that that means that I want to side with everything the American government does? Fuck no. I'm so anti-American government, it hurts.
Mm.
Uh,
Yes.
the, by that same logic, you can't say that, and even if you are criticizing a singular person for an action that they do, that doesn't mean you condemn the person completely either. Like,
Mm.
we've got this incredibly fucked up black and white view of where if someone does
Yeah.
something wrong, then you need to hate them. Uh,
Hmm.
so like,
It's kind of disappointing that Tara Strong is one of those ardent like defenders of Israel's government.
fuck, yeah, it's I I look sideways at anyone whenever they say they are pro-Israel because it's like that doesn't mean you're pro-Jewish. In fact, in many ways, you're Israel is antithetical to Jewish
Hmm.
beliefs and whatnot.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than like one of the big defining things of Judaism in the modern era is how it was influenced by World War II and the Nazis.
Mhm.
And so when you do the exact same shit that the Nazis would have done, I don't know, that just seems pretty
I mean,
anti-Jewish to me.
I mean, they're controlled by a coalition of fascist political parties. I
Exactly.
mean, I mean, the left-wing parties have like 6 seats in the Israeli Knesset, whereas like the Likud party and all these other fascist parties have a supermajority coalition.
Yeah.
That is why, like, you don't see a change in policy from Netanyahu to Gantz. And to bring it back to G.I. Joe, a lot of what Hama got at in his origin story for Snake Eyes were criticisms of Japanese, a lot of like enclaves of Japanese culture, because as a Japanese American, when he went to Japan, they saw him as an outsider and kind of rejected him, even though ethnically he is Japanese, but since he was born in the United States, served in the American military, he wasn't seen as being the same as people who were born in Japan and grew up in Japan. And so part of the reason he chose to make Snake Eyes white was to make it easy for readers to sort of understand that there are these enclaves of Japanese culture who reject outsiders. And Snake Eyes being white was to communicate that he is an outsider in the Arashikage clan.
Yeah.
And so like having a biracial actor who's Malaysian and English, who's not even Japanese, could still communicate that, because it's like Henry Golding does not look anything like any of the other people in the Arashikage clan, who are Andrew Koji and Iku Owai from the Raid movies, who played the Hardmaster. Which another one of the scenes I actually like in the movie was the Hardmaster's trial, where Snake Eyes and the Hardmaster are compete are in this bowl competition where Snake Eyes has to take the Hardmaster's bowl of water without his bowl of water spilling. And so the first two trials, Snake Eyes fails, the Hardmaster knocks him over, he spills his water twice, and then Snake Eyes basically jumps back to the bowl of water, and he hears Storm Shadow, the quote from Storm Shadow in his head, "Abandon ego, and you'll learn solace." And so Snake Eyes basically walks up to the Hardmaster. It's like, "Can I have your bowl of water in exchange for mine?" And that was how he passed his test. Which is like, man, if the rest of the movie was like that, it might have been a solid movie.
Yeah. Whenever I think of any sort of trial carrying water, I don't know if you ever saw Shaolin Showdown.
Oh yes, I did.
There's an episode. There was an episode where it was four simultaneous Shaolin Showdowns happening at the same time, and
Hmm.
Jack Spicer versus Omi. They we're gonna walk through the desert carrying glasses of water, and you have to make it without spilling a drop. And
Hmm.
Omi is behind because Jack Spicer's using the monkey staff, so he's got like extra balance and agility. And so when Jack Spicer's about to reach the end, Omi suddenly just bum rushes past him. He's like, "Hey, no fair. There's no way you could have moved that fast." And Omi just holds up his empty glass and then spits all the water out. He goes, without spilling a drop. It's just like, that
Yeah,
seems like cheating, but okay.
yeah, I vaguely remember that episode because it's like it's been so long since I've actually watched it that a lot of the episodes are like mushed together. But I remember Omi, Clay, Ramundo, Wuya, Jack Spicer, Chase Young, Hannibal Roy Bean.
Yeah, yeah. That episode was really good because what wound up happening is that the other three, I think, all lost their match and they all got captured. And so Omi
Hmm.
has to like go on a commando mission to rescue them. He literally has like a headband around his head, like what you said earlier. And he goes in, and the Shingon Wu he won was the Sun Chi Lantern. And I thought it was so
Hmm.
cool because this is back in season one, so they weren't like literally generating their elements yet. They would just say like
Yeah.
fire and like get a power up. But
Hmm.
Sun Chi Lantern could absorb the chi of other people, and so he literally got power boosted by using Kimiko's fire, Raimundo's wind, and Clay's earth along with his water. So he basically became like a 4-in-1 dude and beat them all. And
He became an avatar.
yeah, and then we never see the Sun-Chi Lantern used again for the entire rest of the series. I'm like, come on. Now that they can actually like shoot fireballs and make big rock
Hmm.
quakes, now you get rid of the thing that would have let one person do all that. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But yeah, I
um,
do remember that about Shaolin Shogun is that the first season they couldn't really channel the elements, but then the second season they were
yeah,
channeling them freely. And
yeah,
wasn't the second season the one
yeah.
where Hannibal Roy Bean gets introduced?
No, that was the third season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Chase Young
Chase Young
was
was in
introduced.
season two.
That's right.
Um, okay, so it's uh, I hate to have to like cut this short, but we are sort of getting at the 5 minute mark, so we should wrap up the
Okay.
episode.
So yeah, in the 90s, that's when like Snake Eyes forms the Ninja Force, and they basically they go on to take on Cobra, and eventually that's how it ends. And then later in the 2000s, when GI Joe, the real American hero phase, is revitalized, they sort of basically reintroduced this team of ninjas. They're not ever really called the Ninja Force, but it's the same people, just in their like more iconic looks, not their 90s new gods looking looks that look so out of place. But they do introduce a character named Kamakura, who is Sean Collins, and Snake Eyes, who's an apprentice of Snake Eyes, and he's the like newest addition to like this team of ninjas in the GI Joe world. And then in the Larry Hama run revitalization, he's renamed Proton, and he becomes Snake Eyes until Dr. Mindbender clones Snake Eyes in GI Joe 300, and now Snake Eyes is basically back from the dead because he does die. And in fact, his funeral issue is another silent issue where
Mm,
it's just all the Joes mourning his loss. And it's actually one of the few times I've actually cried while reading a comic because it's S.L. Gallant did a good job with like showing Timber sniff Snake Eyes' boot to basically indicate he's no longer with us. And then a clone of Snake Eyes is introduced in 300. So the image in the new A Real American Hero series by Larry Hama can have the original Snake Eyes. Granted, since it's a clone, the damage done to him that made it so he can't speak is no longer there. So he can speak. He just, much like the character Driver in Drive, he says very little.
right. Well,
So I guess we gave Snake Eyes his proper dues now.
yeah. Uh,
Even though there were a few tangents, I feel like this one was a bit more cohesive than because that was the first time we'd done this. So it's like there's so much that we could talk about. It's like I felt this one was a bit more focused.
yeah, it helps that you're focusing more in on a character or two rather than trying to break down the breadth of history of the entire pantheon of the G.I. Joe cast to me in an hour and a half. Um,
Yes,
but this was
but
really
yes,
cool. Like I said, I'm a big fan of ninjas, and getting to learn more about Snake Eyes and
hmm
that entire crew, Storm Shadow and Stalker and all them is very cool. So
yes.
thank you once
And hey,
again.
Nathan, you're
Mhm.
very welcome.
Yeah. All right. We'll do the wrap up stuff here. Everybody, thank you for listening. You can join the Cape Corner Discord. The link is in the description. We have suggestion channels where uh, you can, pitch ideas for future episodes. And as Scotty brought up earlier, there is a fun little Who Would Win channel. Um, if you're like me, occasionally you think of things like, who would win between, I don't know, fucking Green Lantern or Invincible or whatever, and then you could like have little discussions about it. So uh, if you guys ever have an idea or want to share thoughts or maybe get our input, that's a great way to do it. Um, do you have any sort of social media that you want to plug?
So last time you had plugged my comic line, and I do actually want to plug my TikTok because I did a 8-part series compare for Yojo June. I did like an 8-part series comparing GI Joe trade paperbacks from Image Comics to the previous IDW ones, where I go
Mhm.
through and sort of show you like how differently these are printed given the different nature of the publishers, and how like the image trades don't have cover galleries; those are saved for the deluxe hardcovers. So it's just the panels, no covers whatsoever. Whereas the IDW trades went from not having covers to break up issues, instead just having numbering in the corners, and then you flip to the back and you get all the covers in the back. So that was one of the things. It's a Scotty Sackham on TikTok. They're rather lengthy videos, but it's because of how like given that I just did this podcast, how much I can talk about G.I. Joe.
Clearly, yes.
But
Um,
it's also like how much I can talk about like the printing and art process of actually making a comic book.
yeah. There's so much that can be said about the entire industry for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
All right. Make sure that you send me a link in Discord after
yeah,
this so that I can put that in the description.
yeah.
Um, we are also part of the Holopods Podcast Network. Fandom Optimists, SJW Comic Book Club, True Believers, a comic book podcast, and Movies to Watch Before You Die. They're all
I've
super
been a
cool
guest
people.
on two of those.
Do what?
I've been a guest on two of those podcasts.
Yes. Um,
Random Optimist and Movies to Watch Before You Die.
oh, fucking Andrew. Sorry, I just finally remembered the Hulk episode I was talking about. My guest was Andrew from
Oh, yeah,
True Believers. So,
yeah,
uh, Andrew, if you happen to be listening, I'm so sorry it took me that long to remember your name. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, so go give those guys a listen. They're all pretty cool. So once more, thank you all for listening. Uh, I can't remember. Did I just do my usual sign off last time? Uh,
I think you did. We can all be a real American heroes because
uh,
it was a GI Joe.
okay. Well, then this time I'll say, you know, thanks for telling me about Snake Eyes, Scotty. Now I know. And
And
knowing
knowing
is
is
half
half
the
the
battle.
battle.